The whole idea for building a ghostwriting agency in the first place was you have a lot of really smart people who have spent 30 years acquiring knowledge, having a successful career in whatever industry. They are, call it 10 to 20 years away from retiring. And when they retire, where does all their knowledge go? It just evaporates. In a weird way, if you have a really successful career and then never find a way to pass along everything that you've just learned, there's no compounding benefit to all the lessons that you've acquired, right? Which means the next person has to basically start over. They're like, you could have told me all the answers, but you never documented it. You never shared it. And to me, that was the idea behind building things in the world of ghostwriting.
All right, Nicholas Cole, welcome to the podcast, man.
Making magic.
Of course. And we've met multiple times. We've had Dickie on, your business partner as well. So glad to catch you and have you on the pod before you potentially move to Phoenix. I don't know. That's public information.
Yeah. Oh, we might as well. It's fine. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
I mean, we can cut it out if it's not.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think probably going to move there next year. And then, that's where we'll build our second studio. And the empire continues.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, glad to have you on. You're crushing it in the online space. So would kind of love to just dive straight into just the art of online writing, right? I know you've written a few books on it as well, but where do you see this online writing and space as a career for a lot of people?
So I think it depends on, everything depends on what do you want out of it. You know, I think a trend that I noticed back in 2016, my first business was a ghostwriting agency for executives. So I ghostwrote for hundreds and hundreds of different CEOs, founders, et cetera. And there's been this growing trend of business owners wanting to write because writing is a vehicle for, and then insert whatever the end goal is, right? Writing is a vehicle for proving expertise. Writing is a vehicle for building relationships at scale. Writing is a vehicle for building trust at scale. And it's been interesting to watch, you think of it like a barbell. You have the creator side where you just have individuals that are passionate about writing or they want to build an audience or whatever it is. And then on the other side of the barbell, you have CEOs who are like, I don't really care about being known as a writer, but I want to use writing as a vehicle to unlock something else, And so it all depends on what do you want out of it. On the CEO side, they don't want to write a book because they want to be a professional writer or be an author. They want to write a book so that they establish their dominance in a category primarily, If you're a creator, it's sort of the same thing, just on a way smaller scale. It's like, I want to write because it could be organic traffic for your business. It could be you want to be a serial author. It could be I just enjoy sharing my thoughts and I want to connect with other people. I joke all the time, I have more friends on the internet than I do in real life, and that's the product of writing. So in my opinion, I think all of this is just going to get more and more popular. Like I saw this happening in 2016. It's almost a decade ago at this point. And there's more people today that want all of those things than 8 years ago. And there will be even more of those people 8 years from now wanting those same things. And you've been building businesses for a long time too. Like how many times have people said Facebook ads is dead?
Some every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Or people say email is dead. Every year. And every year, Facebook makes more money and more people start newsletters. So I think it's one of those things where myopically, if you look at anything in isolation, it's very easy to be like, this has been around for 10 years. I bet its time is over. But if you really extend the time horizon, you ask the question, well, is this in a growing category or a shrinking category? Newsletters are only going to get more popular 10 years from now, And unless something drastic happens, I bet Facebook ads only get more popular 10 years from now. So
your bet's trajectory is going up.
Yeah, like either way, it's all, as the category grows, our businesses will grow because we're building a business in a growing category. So as more and more people want to do it, more people want to learn how to write, more people want to monetize their writing. I kind of feel like that is largely not like the secret of business, but the purpose. The purpose is to build something in a growing category or create a category that has the potential to grow so that as more and more people pile into the category, you benefit, right?
Yeah, I think it's like in $100 million offers. If you build a top business model in a dying environment,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting what you said in terms of there's the CEO, the business owner who they don't really care about the writing aspect itself as a writer or being a writer, but they want to be able to, show their knowledge, show their dominance, and really show their expertise. So what have you found just from writing for so many executives before you started this? Like, what was that like in working with them? Like, how are you able to transform their thoughts and their expertise into something that was in their voice?
So it's an interesting question because sort of the whole idea for building a ghostwriting agency in the first place was you have a lot of, like, just take a step back. You have a lot of really smart people who have spent 30 years acquiring knowledge, having a successful career in whatever industry. They are, call it 10 to 20 years away from retiring. And when they retire, where does all their knowledge go? It just evaporates, right? So in a weird way, if you have a really successful career and then never find a way to pass along everything that you've just learned, there's no compounding benefit to all the lessons that you've acquired, right? Which means the next person has to basically start over. They're like, you could have told me all the answers, but you never documented it. You never shared it. And to me, that was the idea behind building things in the world of ghostwriting, is that you have a lot of, it's like the Michael Jordan effect. You have a lot of really talented Michael Jordans who know how to dominate a game, but don't know how to explain it or don't know how to teach it or aren't taking the time to teach it, right? He's like the greatest basketball player of all time and one of the worst coaches and owners of all time, right? So not coach, owner. And the same is true with CEOs, is all of these people are really, really smart and they need help extracting the knowledge because you can't, if you're a CEO that is used to a CEO's salary, or you're a startup founder that owns 10% of a multi-billion-dollar startup, you can't rationalize spending 500 hours writing a book, right? You just can't because the return on your time is so low compared to your business. But that doesn't mean that the knowledge that you have isn't valuable. So what do? Most people then go hire a ghostwriter. And what gets misunderstood is the ghostwriter isn't putting words in the person's mouth. The ghostwriter literally is extracting the knowledge and going, I'm going to do all the manual labor of removing the tangents, removing the unnecessary stories, and just whittling it down. And that's the pairing, smart person who has knowledge, who doesn't have the skill set for writing and doesn't have the time to write. And then you have the ghostwriter who doesn't have 30 years of knowledge, but has the skill set of writing and has the time to write. And so something that I share often is, those who have knowledge are the ones who aren't going to write it. And those who have the time to write usually don't have the knowledge. And so you have this interesting problem that gets easily solved when you just pair those two types of people together.
Yep. And what frameworks have you seen best in terms of the ghostwriter working with this person who has the knowledge to extract it out efficiently, right? Because they're constrained on time.
Yeah. So there's kind of two big ones. When I was building my agency, our default was we would have conversations like this, be a phone call, and then we would record the conversation. We'd take the recording, get it transcribed. It's kind of cool to look back on because now there's AI tools that can do all of this. But like we were basically doing this manually or using, you could outsource transcription to, transcription farms basically in other countries where people are just doing that for minimum wage. And so you record the call, you get it transcribed, and then you give it to the ghostwriter. And they basically take the transcription. And I like to think of it as they're not actually writing. They're editing down the transcription to something concise. Because if you look at a transcription of an interview or a call, you have 20% of it that's all just like, sort of, right? There's all the unnecessary words. So just throw that out. Then you have another 30% of random tangents that have nothing to do with what you're actually trying to say, right? So 50% of it is already like, you could just delete it. And then the other 50% is just deciding, okay, you gave, 3 different interesting ideas. We can't fit all 3 of them into one piece. So someone has to sit there and go, let's save these other 2 for another piece. and let's just focus on this one, right? And by the end of it, you take a transcription that's 30 minutes long or 60 minutes long, and you're really just whittling it down to 600, 800 words. And that's hard. That's the skill. And so that framework worked really well as we were building an agency. And if you want to automate that, you find someone who in some way is already creating content. Like you could do this with this podcast, right? Someone who has a podcast, someone who gives speeches, someone who writes books, they've already done the thinking. Mm-hmm. So the thinking's done. The 80% is done. Now you just need someone to whittle it down and organize it and post it and edit it. And there's all the little labor components.
Yeah. Just building the systems and processes to get it streamlined. Nice. And so that's how you came up with your current business idea. So you train ghostwriters, or you teach people how to become ghostwriters. What if someone has like no writing experience, right? Like what's your advice to the beginner writer or someone who has very minimal, but they want to get good at writing? Are there certain like strategies or frameworks you have for someone to write on Twitter? Or, what's the best way you've seen to train writers?
Yeah, because we've seen this in Ship 30 too, because Ship 30 is, how do you write on the internet? What are the basics of writing on the internet? And the easiest 10x anyone can make to their writing is actually not the writing component, it's the formatting component. Because you have a lot of really talented people who write these amazing essays on the internet, but they're formatted like a college essay. They're just these giant blocks of text, and nobody reads that way anymore. And so if someone doesn't have writing experience, it's actually easier to not think about it as I have to teach you how to write. And instead, I'm going to show you sort of the proven templates of how do you format things. Like what is the format of an ideal X thread? I don't know what we're calling it these days anymore, right? So what's the ideal format of a thread? What's the ideal format of a blog post? What's the ideal format of a Medium article? What's the ideal format of a newsletter? And if you understand visually how that's structured, all you have to do is take the skeleton of how it's structured, go to the transcript, and just plug in, they said that opinion. Let's make that the first sentence. They explained these 3 strategies. Cool. Those are going to be our 3 subheads, right? So you're thinking of it almost like Legos instead of writing.
Yes.
And I feel like for beginners, that's a way easier place to start.
Exactly. So for you, it's the hook, the body, and then some sort of close, essentially.
Yeah. The format that we teach, because it's the easiest to learn, and it is quite literally 80-90% of the content on the internet, is hook/credibility introduction. Here's my strong opinion. Here's why you should listen to me. And then it's a list. It's like, here's tip number 1, here's tip number 2, here's tip number 3, or here's mistake number 1, mistake number 2, mistake number 3, and then maybe a brief conclusion. And if you understand that structure, you can basically write anything. What's funny is every time I explain that, the first thing that someone says back is, well, I don't want to write listicles. I don't want to write lists because that's not real writing. I don't want to be a BuzzFeed writer. And what they don't realize is even my degree is in fiction writing. Like, most people don't realize that I spend more time studying literature than I do studying writers on the internet, ironically. Mm-hmm. And so what you don't realize is that even high grade literature is listicles. Like if I was to describe this room, what would I be doing? I would be listing the things in the room. If I was to describe a person, I would be listing the different things that I notice about you as a person, right? So it's sort of like, do you play musical instruments growing up at all?
I played a guitar.
Okay.
I forgot now. Completely forgot, but I did.
I played classical piano for 20 years. Okay. And I've largely forgotten a lot of it as well.
Even after 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, some muscle memory stuff, but like I can't sight read music anymore. I've forgotten a lot. But in a very basic way, if you were to learn a musical instrument, right, you don't start, like everyone who doesn't or isn't successful at learning a musical instrument, they start by going, let me just learn the pop song that I want to play, right? Let me start by playing Freebird. But if you start by learning chords and scales, well, then you can play anything, right? And I was classically trained, so I spent years learning chords and scales and everything. And writing is the same thing. Like if you can't assemble a list, you're not going to be able to write a book, right? If you can't write an 800-word listicle, how are you going to write a great newsletter? right? So it's like, it's this weird, the shortcut is the longer road in disguise. You know, everyone always just wants, like, how do I write a viral Twitter thread? How do I write something that gets 1 million views? But if you're not understanding the underlying components, well, okay, great. You write a viral Twitter thread. Now what?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So your biggest thing is to learn structures for all these different writing components.
Yes.
And then from there, build on top of that.
Yeah. I'm a very, like, first principles, foundation matters type of thinker. It's not worth learning something just to go, I know how to do that one specific thing. It's better to understand the components that make that thing so you can make lots of other different things. And so with writing, a lot of it, you know, again, what's the easiest 10x? Just learn the structures. What's a great newsletter? What does it look like? How is it formatted? Well, now your newsletter looks better than someone who's a great writer, but it's just giant walls of text.
Yeah.
Right.
And so where do you see that differ? Like between a great X thread versus like a great newsletter? Like how do you have a framework for that, for example?
It almost always comes down to constraint of platform. You know, it's like you can apply the same thing to copy on Facebook ads or you know, captions on Instagram Reels. It's like every platform limits you in some way. It could be a character count limit, word count limit. It could be a formatting limitation. Like on LinkedIn, you can't bold things, right? So if you're posting a really long status on LinkedIn and you don't have a bold feature, how do you create subheads? You're like, okay, well, now I have to get creative. Maybe I'm going to put my subheads in all caps, or I'm going to put 3 asterisks next to my all caps set, right? So like, it's understanding the limitations of the platform and then working within those limitations. And the mistake is the opposite. The mistake is someone just going, I'm going to take the same text from my newsletter and just copy paste the exact same structure of that on LinkedIn or on another platform. And it's like, you're not respecting the physics of how these different platforms work.
Yeah. I think the top people, they have someone who specializes in each.
Definitely.
In each platform, like a TikTok editor, an IG Reels editor, Twitter editor, LinkedIn editor as well.
Because they're different languages.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to understand the nuances of the different languages.
Yeah. So I guess like how has your writing foundation helped you in terms of writing a book? Because I think that's kind of like a lot of people's dreams eventually, or at least creators and people who write and want to share their knowledge, is to eventually write a book. But it's not easy to just write an entire book. So I guess what were the big turning points for you that got you to that point? And I guess even throughout your book writing journey.
This is such a rabbit hole because there's so many different things. So one is, all a book is, like, again, break things down to their most basic unit, right? All a book is 12 chapters in a book is just 12 long form blog posts. A long form blog post is really just 5 short form blog posts or atomic essays bolted together. A short form blog post or atomic essay is really just 5 tweets stacked on top of each other. So it's one of those things where if it's writing a book is hard, but writing 1,000 tweets that get stacked up onto each other that create short form posts that get stacked on top of each other that create long form posts that get stacked on top of each other that become 12 chapters is not hard. Mm-hmm. And when you reframe it that way, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is really actionable. But when someone sets out to write a book, it feels impossible because you're trying to hold 300 pages in your head, and you shouldn't do that, right? You should hold 50 words in your head and then stack another 50 words on top of it, and then stack another 50 words on top of it, you know? And so with that in mind, it's like, if you want to write a book, that's the way to practice it, is you should be writing short form content, and you should be testing the ideas. You should be learning, okay, well, this idea was really helpful. This idea wasn't. I'm just going to stack all the helpful ideas on top of each other. I have a chapter, you know? For the average person, writing a book is a waste of time, though, because the return on your effort is very low. Like, it's way easier to make $5,000 a month starting a Substack or starting a cohort-based course or starting a service business than it is making $5,000 a month selling books. Like 100x easier. And so if you're going to write a book, I think the first question is, do you want to write one book or do you want to write 100 books? Like that's the question. If you're only going to write one, it's probably not in your best interest to spend all that time learning how to write a book because you're only going to do it once. Mm-hmm. It would be like spending 7 years learning how to build a startup and being like, and I'm never going to start another company. It's like, why did you spend 7 years acquiring all that knowledge then, right? So if you're only going to write one, then just work with a ghostwriter. You have the knowledge, pair with someone else and have them do all the labor. If you want to be a serial author, well, then it's worth acquiring the skill. Like I want to write 100 books, so I'm going to learn that skill. Yeah. But most people don't want that. And most people who think they want that don't actually, like they think that
they don't know what it comes with.
Yeah, exactly. They don't know what they're signing themselves up for.
That makes sense. And so for, let's say, like the ghostwriter, right? They're starting out. What have you seen is best in today's day and age for writing in terms of, hey, this is the best chance to go viral or grow your account? Is it 3 short form tweets a day and 2 threads a week, longer form threads? Is it, is it only short form tweets? Like what have you seen is best currently?
So this is one of those topics I have very strong opinions on. Every time people ask this question, and if you notice how people talk about it, they always talk about it in terms of the vehicle and never the thing inside the vehicle. So they're like, should I be posting on Instagram or TikTok? Should it be short form video or long form video? Should it be 5 tweets a day or 2 threads a week? And all of that doesn't matter if the ideas inside of the vehicles aren't valuable. So everyone wants to know, should I post at 1 p.m. or 3 p.m.? But that decision is completely irrelevant. And we should be talking about, well, so what are you saying, right? Because anytime there's an algorithm change or anytime someone goes, okay, short form video is what's taking off, there's a bunch of outliers that are succeeding with the opposite of that, right? So it's not actually the medium, it's the idea inside of it. And so from my perspective, the idea inside of it and what everyone should be focused on is education. Like it actually doesn't matter what time of day you post or what thing you're posting. It actually is a question of who are you educating? Like who's the person that you're trying to help? And what's the degree to which you're able to help them? Like, and most people don't stress test this. It's like, if I'm trying to teach you how to write and my advice, the thing I'm putting inside the vehicle is you just have to do it. That's really mediocre education, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm like, the key to writing is authenticity. That's really mediocre education.
Yeah.
And yet everyone's like, but I posted it at the right time. Doesn't matter, right? So the question is, how deep on the education scale are you going? Are you just saying you have to be authentic, or are you actually going 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers deep and actually giving someone a framework for here's how you assemble a great headline, or here's how you format a newsletter that people actually read, right? And most people aren't taking the time to pause and go, am I actually helping someone? And I feel like there's a weird thing that happens on the internet where because it's happening through a screen, we like judge it differently. But I like using the coffee shop test, which is if you and I went and got coffee and you sat down and you're like, Cole, I got an hour. Give me your best writing advice. If I sat here and was just like, you got to follow your heart and right?
Yeah.
You would leave
believing
that
yourself,
Yeah. You'd leave that coffee being like, that was the biggest waste of time ever. And yet that's what most people do when they create their content. They don't actually go through the coffee shop test. Like, is the person leaving your hour-long coffee meeting going, I just got more than an entire degree? Or are they leaving being like, you wasted an hour of my life?
Yeah. And I think right now, I think most content is pretty generic, right? So the way it sounds like to differentiate is just go deeper.
Yeah.
Provide value.
And it's generic in the sense that I think like social media is one of those things where there's such a low barrier to entry that you can because anyone can do it, everyone assumes that it's easy. And obviously that's not true. It's a very easy game to learn and it's a very hard game to master. And so just because you tweeted doesn't mean that you did anything, right? Or just because you created a short form video doesn't mean that you're capitalizing on the trend of short form video. It's like you have to really ask yourself, how am I helping this person advance from A to B in some way? What do they need? And if you're not dialed in on that, then it literally doesn't matter if you have all the mechanics right. Because everyone's going to be like, I didn't learn anything from my coffee shop interaction with you.
That makes sense. So I guess where do you spend most of your time right now between balancing business and writing? Like how do you schedule your day currently?
It's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very fortunate because Dickie is an amazing co-founder and business partner.
Shout out Dickie.
Yeah, he is awesome. And he handles a lot more of the operational side of things, which allows me to spend more time creating new things. That's sort of the sweet spot of our dynamic is we have a new product idea. My superpower is being able to create it very, very quickly. And his superpower is understanding how to leverage it and how do we get it in front of a lot of people and how do we help them go through it in a way that's like, wow, that was the best course I've ever taken in my life. And so a lot of my day is spent writing. You know, usually I have 3 to 4 different writing sprints. You know, it's usually like 7 to 9 a.m. ish, maybe 11 to 1 p.m., 1 to 3 p.m., and then usually again late at night, maybe 7 to 9 p.m.
Wow, so you're writing a lot.
Oh yeah,
in a day.
I can confidently say I probably write the equivalent of a book every single week.
That's crazy. You just have that much ideas that you can just...
Ideas and just fluency. Like, I don't have to think about how to assemble things anymore. Like, if we come up with a video course idea, I can write the entire course, all the modules, everything in like a week or 2.
That's interesting you say that because right now, I'm just now starting to write, and I think it's because I don't have the fundamental structure and core principles solved yet, the foundations.
And also, it's worth recognizing, like, I've been doing this since I was 17 years old. You know, I've been writing for a really long time. And so it's like when you walk into the gym and you see someone who's been lifting for a decade and you're like, I don't understand how you're doing what you're doing. It's well, you know, there's a lot of steps that came before that. But getting up to speed on writing is not hard. You know, anyone can learn the skill. But yeah, I've definitely reached a point where I can move very quickly and I can also juggle very different types of projects at the same time in my head. Like I can prep the page on one, step away from it, work on something else, and then in my subconscious, I know I'm thinking about the first one so that when I return back to it, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what I want to say. So that skill is also something that takes a long time.
Yeah. So I guess like translating that into business, what business bottlenecks and struggles are you guys currently going through right now?
By far the biggest bottleneck is we have more ideas than we have time to build. You know, there's no shortage of ways that we can help people. We launched PGA, our Premium Ghostwriting Academy, maybe, I don't even know what month. Is it September?
Yeah, September.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we launched it maybe 6 months ago. And that's been growing a lot. And right now, the biggest bottleneck to that is literally just we need to get in front of more freelancers. The whole idea with that is the vast majority of freelance writers are charging per hour or even charging per word, which is horrendous. And some even get up to charging per month. But all of those are still anchored to time and effort. And anytime your service is anchored to time or effort, you're stuck. And so the whole focus in PGA is educating these writers not just on how to ghostwrite, but also how to package and price your services. How do you sell a package service? How do you create efficiencies for yourself? How do you run a really profitable one-person writing business? And so the curriculum is dialed in. We've already had, 300 plus people go through it. We've had almost no refund requests.
Wow.
Like it's clearly very helpful. And so now we just need to get in front of more and more freelancers going, hey, the way you're making money right now is not it. And, easily from there, one of the big questions I wanted to jam on with you is like the tripling question. Like when you have a business, what is required for it to triple? And I think PGA can triple from here. And that requires certain things, And so I'm also curious to ask you, as you were building your own business, what was required for it to triple from, where it was before, and where you are now, what is required for it to triple from here? Yeah. And do you want that? That's also part of the question is, do you want that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And so the context when it comes to, or the framework I use when it comes to that is, you need to basically see where you are in business, because to triple earlier on in business is very different from later. Mm-hmm. So from where you guys are, just from what, numbers Dickie and I have talked about in the past, you're at the stage where to triple is to just do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Do more. And it sounds like such simple advice, but it's not, because I went through the same issues. When you're in this phase where you first start to make money and you're doing, 6 figures a month, right? To get to basically 7 figures a month or close to that, maybe high 6 figures a month, to go from that range, it's literally increasing volume. So figuring out how can you increase more leads coming through the door. Mm-hmm. And if you have a sales process that you can convert at X%, at that point, it's really just increasing in volume on the top of funnel, which is your marketing. Now, in this area though, as an entrepreneur, this is where you have a million ideas. You see, oh, but what if we launch this other thing that people are talking about, or I want to work on this project. But I probably in hindsight could have gotten to this number a lot faster if I just focused on the boring stuff, which is figuring out how you can increase your leads on the front end. And on the sales side, how you can increase the amount of closers that you bring in, and then start building out systems there. And eventually, when you get up to high 6 figures, implementing in a sales manager to automate everything. But if there's two of you guys, it's really just one person can run the sales team and one person can focus on increasing in lead flow. And if those are your guys' KPIs and you both hit them, you'll triple.
That's very reassuring, because that's exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It's like literally nothing else needs to change. We just need to triple our leads.
Yep.
And yeah, that ends up being there are fun things about it, but yeah, it's a very boring task.
It's a very boring
task.
It's
like ignore all shiny objects, just do the one thing.
Yes.
So then with that in mind, what do you feel like the difference is where your business is now to triple from here? It probably isn't that.
Correct.
So then what is required? And also, just out of curiosity, do you want to do that? Or are you like, you know what, I love where we are right now?
Yeah. So I do want to triple, and it's a different game. So basically, once you do that and you solve that, how you triple from where I'm at is there's two things that have to come into play. You have to build out a leadership team. So a full on, right people in the right seats, leadership team. So it could be you have a head of fulfillment or head of operations, depending on what business you run, head of marketing. But sometimes in this business, you can also have the CEO do marketing. So it's not like a necessary thing, but head of marketing, you have some sort of head of sales, right? And then HR/finance. So you need a proper leadership team, because there's just so much stuff and issues that can go wrong. And at that point, you want to be able to have the bandwidth and brain space to think outside of the business, not just inside of the business. Because to go and triple once you're at 7 figures a month, to triple, to get to multi 8 figures a month, you need a leadership team and you need more products and offers. And so from there, you need to decide, okay, am I scaling horizontally or am I scaling vertically and having different back-end product offerings or different front end offerings to expand the niche you're in. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also it's interesting because I can tell that decision is the shiny object right now, because there's so many ideas that we have to go, okay, I could scale this horizontally. We could scale this vertically.
yep.
But getting to 7 figures a month is, I have to say no to all of that.
Absolutely.
Trust we can build that later, and literally just one job, increase lead flow. And that's it.
You will have all the time. You'll have all the time in the world to do all these other things. It's just the visionary, the CEO side of you that's like, hey, I need to launch this product, or I see this opportunity and this opportunity. But people underestimate how much work and time and effort it takes to go from 6 figures a month to 7 figures a month, because throughout that whole process, you're training managers for the first time. You're building systems and processes, right? Because it's not just increasing lead flow. You have to be able to increase lead flow consistently and reliably at whatever cost or price you're paying per lead, and do that at 3x, 4x, 5x to scale to get to 7 figures a month. Same exact thing on the sales side. You have to build a process that you can recruit closers reliably. You have to have a process that you can train them reliably as well, retain them as well. And then on top of that, prepare yourself to build the next sales manager, because once you get up to 5, 6 closers, which is required, you need someone to manage them as well. And so you're training managers for the first time, you're building infrastructure, and that's a long process. That's 9 to 12 months without making any mistakes. And if you do make mistakes along the way, it will take longer.
Yeah. There's two things I've been thinking about a lot lately in terms of scaling. One is the importance of pausing at each phase. I think it's more than easy. I think it's very addicting, where once you start pushing through a new plateau and you start growing, you want that dopamine constantly, So you're like, okay, we just hit 100K a month. Now I want 200K. And then you get there and you're like, now I want 300K. And then you get there, you're like, now I want 400K. And if you don't take the time to pause at some of these varying stages of growth and clean up what just happened, because I've even felt it in our businesses, going from 50K a month to as high as 500K a month, completely different businesses. And if you don't pause and clean that up, yeah, you can continue pushing a bit, but then it's just going to break further and further and further. And that's been a really hard, I feel like anyone who's entrepreneurial is like, I'm just going to leave my foot on the gas all the time. And that's a hard skill to acquire, is knowing how to let off the gas and intentionally and be like, we're not going to grow for 3 months just so we can
build infrastructure.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's where self-awareness really comes in handy. Checks and balances, or you have someone that this is like the visionary versus integrator. So in a business, for it to really get to that next level, 7 figures a month plus, right? Becoming an 8-figure business, there's a visionary and an integrator. And so the visionary is this person that has all of these ideas. They're always looking for opportunities. They're growing. They could be the face or content person as well, but they're the person with big ideas. The integrator needs to be the check and balance of this person. They need to be the ones big. Hey, thanks for bringing me 10 ideas. We can only execute on one of these ideas this quarter due to our team's capacity.
Yeah.
Or, hey, thanks for all your ideas. We can't do any of that this quarter because we need to build infrastructure, or else we're not going to be able to fulfill all of these new students that came in from our last quarter, where we had a huge spike. And if we don't do that, we're going to get a lot of refund requests and unhappy customers, which you don't want. So you need that. But a lot of people don't just find that perfect match in business, right? It's like sometimes it's two visionaries, or sometimes it's, if it's a solo founder, it's a visionary, and there's no integrator or COO in the company that has say to push back. And so now everyone is doing 10 different projects for the quarter, and it's chaos because the visionary sees all this opportunity, yet the business isn't growing. And it's because he or she keeps throwing all these ideas, and there's no person to filter and be like, hey, we can't do this. This is what we can actually do.
Yep. Shout out to Dickie for being a amazing integrator.
Nice.
Because yeah, without him, I would absolutely fall into that trap. And I think vice versa, if you're a solo founder and you're an integrator, or if you're co-founders and you're both integrators, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce. You know, it's like harder to see the forest from the trees. That's something that visionary type is really good at, seeing the bigger picture, you know? So yeah, it's fascinating to look back on other ventures that I've done and other businesses that I've tried to build. And I'd say the vast majority of the time, the root issue was that. It's like you don't have that right pairing. And so you could have the best idea in the world. It's just not going to go anywhere, you know?
Yeah. But what you're going through is normal. Like everyone goes through it. I went through it. I know so many others. It's kind of just, if I just focused and ignored all of the boring stuff and ignored all of the opportunities and just focused on the main thing, and I did that unrelentlessly for 6 to 12 months, like what I told you about, building the marketing side, increasing lead flow, sales, making sure fulfillment is good as well, and you can handle all of the new clients coming in. That right there will get you high 6 figures or 7 figures a month. And then from there, that's when you should start looking at new opportunities.
Yeah. I like that. It's a good blueprint for us to think about.
Yep.
Yeah. It was really helpful joining, shout out to Cole Gordon and his team, because the 8-figure boardroom mastermind it was really helpful in the sense of there's something desensitizing about sitting in a room of people that are all in that range. And to me, the biggest takeaway from going to that event that we met at was, well, if everyone else here can do it, there's no reason why we can't too, you know? And I feel like that is also a really interesting thing. And to me, that is like the whole benefit of masterminds, is it's almost not even what you learn. It's just when you surround yourself with other people who are doing the same thing, all of a sudden $1 million a month doesn't seem hard when there's 75 other people in the room doing that or are about to do that, you know? And so that's been cool too, to reflect back on, because PGA, I don't even know, maybe we had just launched it right before we went to Cabo. And yeah, it was really young. It was like 60 days old maybe. And now looking at how much we've grown on the heels of that, I'm like, oh, okay, just give this another 6 months. And yeah.
Yeah. I think for new entrepreneurs, where new entrepreneurs lack the most is confidence, because it's your first time doing something you don't really know. And so I remember even the very first mastermind I joined was Sam Ovens back in early 2019.
OG mastermind. Yeah.
And I remember going into that mastermind, not knowing what to expect. And back then I think there was 70 entrepreneurs in that first mastermind that I joined. And he made everyone go around, say what business you do, who you are, and how much revenue you do a month. And we went around the room, and it got to me. I was somewhere halfway, and I was at, I don't know, 30K a month, if that, maybe 25.
Mm-hmm.
And after the whole thing was done, I was the lowest revenue entrepreneur in that room. But my biggest takeaway going to that was meeting people in the 6-figure a month range. I think even a few people in the 7-figure a month, and then realizing, having that click where you're like, wow, these people aren't actually smarter than me.
Mm-hmm.
They just have more confidence. They've just made more mistakes. They know what to do. And I think once you have that first realization as an entrepreneur, that's when you realize, hey, this stuff's actually not that hard. It's a system. To get from 6 to 7 figures is a process and blueprint. To get from 7 to 8 figures is a process or blueprint. And you just have to basically go through the trials and tribulations and execute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they do the boring things. That to me was the biggest takeaway from the mastermind in Cabo, which was I up to that point, I think I had always thought of growth as creating new things. And that was really the first moment where it clicked for me that growth is often not creating new things. It's doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And it's kind of a funny place to be because I'm a very creative individual and I like living in that world, you know? And so it's been fascinating building this business, especially with Dickie, because I think Dickie's a much more structured thinker than I am. And how the moments of creativity are actually kind of few and far between. It's like we'll spend a month or two creating something new, and then we'll spend 9 months building the systems and scaling it and improving it, and getting comfortable with that as a creative person has been challenging.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like you have this superpower and you're intentionally going, I'm going to put it on the back burner and I'm only going to pull it out like once or twice a year. And it's really funny to be that person and to then see your earning potential like skyrocket, but you're like, but I'm only using my skill set a couple times a year. Like that, getting comfortable with, I think, is a very weird dynamic for creative people.
It is. And this just comes down to fluidity, because at different stages of the business, it requires different parts and versions of you. Mm-hmm. But if you don't realize that, you become the bottleneck in your business.
Yes. Which, circling back to what we were talking about with books, like that's why I write so many books, to be honest, because it's a vehicle for me to constantly be creative without distracting the business. So it's like during the day, I know what we need to do. We have to do the boring stuff. Let's go do that. Mm-hmm. But then early in the morning or late at night, I have to keep giving myself that. And I feel like that structure has worked really well for me, because in the past, I would try and make the business my outlet for that. And when you make your business the outlet for your creativity all the time, you end up hurting your business because you can't chase 10 squirrels at once, you know? So it's kind of interesting whenever people are like, oh, you're so prolific, you write all these books. It's like, I'm doing it just so that like Dickie doesn't pull his hair out, you know, just so that we keep the business on track and we stay focused. I just have to facilitate this somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting now because like last year we weren't doing the numbers we are currently, but last year I was grinding and pulling my hair out and doing all these things. And it wasn't until I really just systemized everything with the boring work and had it fixed. And then now my time is just now freeing up again over the past few months where, okay, now I can focus on the next big thing, which is for me, it's going to be coming down to creating content and launching the new offer. So.
Do you want to share, or have you shared what the new offer is?
It's going to be B2B.
Oh, yes. In the world of trading?
Not in the world of trading. It's going to be a horizontal niche, but it's going to be B2B. Because I feel like I know so many business owners. Mm-hmm. I understand the struggles of a business owner, and so that's my next project I want to focus on is going after that consumer and really solving their pain points.
Have you ever built a B2B business before?
No.
I would love to jam with you on it, and also questions you have, because I've sold to so many CEOs. Like one idea I have is I would love to do a whole training program around how to sell specifically to CEOs or how to sell to executives. Because the way you sell to an executive is completely different than how you sell to a consumer. And normally those worlds are very separate. Mm-hmm. Like if someone knows B2B, they stay in B2B their whole life. And if someone knows consumer, they stay in consumer. And most people don't go back and forth because they are so different. And because my agency was all selling to CEOs, it's so funny. Yeah, I was just talking with Dickie yesterday. Like the moment we want to create a B2B offer, because that world, I mean, yeah, you can charge so much more. The fulfillment is so different.
So tell me a little bit about like the differences that you've seen on the B2B side.
So the biggest one is it is like learning a completely different language. Like the consumer language and B2B language, it's literally the difference between the way that you talk to your friends in high school versus like learning a language the formal way. You know, B2B there's a lot of jargon and rules and red tape and things that you have to navigate that you don't have to deal with on the consumer side. And that's a huge part of the sales process, is like how you position the offer and how you go about framing the value often takes place in the context of how they allocate dollars. So like most people don't know that if you're a $100 million company or $1 billion company, you have to spend a certain number of dollars each quarter or each year. So a lot of times, if you can position your offer, especially in the context of like, I know that the year end is coming up and I know that you have some discretionary budget that you need to get rid of, and I can help you rationalize doing that right now for a specific reason. That's a very different way of selling than like, I have $1,000 product or I have a $300 product, The other thing is when you sell to CEOs, there's like no other way to say this, but it is all an ego game. Like when you're talking to a high-powered executive, you're dealing with someone who has no time. Their inbox is a disaster. They have a gazillion meetings on their calendar. Everyone wants their attention. They have massive decision fatigue, and they're used to being the smartest, most powerful person in the room. And so you have to learn how to have those conversations and literally match that energy. Because if you show up as like you're the CEO of the $1 billion company and I'm the lowly vendor, it's ruined. It never works. But if you show up as we are peers and I speak your language, I understand your priorities, I understand what you're challenged with, I understand you have no time, I understand you're exhausted from making decisions, I'm only going to present one option, it's going to be the easiest thing for you to say yes to. Like if you can dial that in, that's the whole secret to selling to B2B.
Yeah.
You have to remove any and all friction. That's why our ghostwriting offer was literally, I need you to hop on a call once every 2 weeks. I will send all the questions beforehand so you can look at them. I just need you to get on the phone and talk. Because I knew if I asked for anything else, they would be like, I don't have time for that.
Smart.
So whatever the B2B offer is, it's like, how do you remove every point of friction so all they have to do is go, yep, that sounds good.
And solving their biggest pain point, basically, or whatever pain point you're solving for them.
Yeah, or something, it goes back to our category conversation, like solving a problem that they have sort of already decided, or you can educate them on, that's going to get more and more urgent over time. So my agency in 2016, was all positioned around thought leadership articles. Every year that has gone by, companies have had the conversation of we should position our executives as thought leaders more and more and more and more and more and more and more. So when you're selling something B2B, you basically want to think about how can I either be part of a conversation that they're already having internally, like imagine them doing their offsite and them being like, it's really time we prioritize our thought leadership, for example, right? Or you're able to educate them on something so that at their next offsite or their next team meeting, they're like, I just had this really interesting conversation and I feel like this is a new item that we should start thinking about prioritizing. And if you're in that sweet spot, it's very easy for them to say yes because they're like, it's a priority. We need to do this. Let's just say yes. Whereas if you're trying to sell something that they're like, we've had an agency doing that for us for 8 years, well, now that's a totally different sales process.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. It's going to be a new journey, but it feels like I'm like starting a new thing all over again, especially with like the content side and that. So
yeah, you totally are. And like a cool pro tip with B2B is, what's cool on the content side is virality doesn't matter. Like the whole point of creating content with B2B is actually sending the content directly to the person. It's not actually the public distribution. So something to think about too is as you build your own content engine, what's for the consumer side, and then what's something you could create where it's like the audience for that is small. It's probably not ever going to go viral. But when I have a follow-up with some CEO or executive that I'm pitching, I can send them this piece of content and be like, hey, see, I was just explaining how this works. This is how you solve this problem. This is why we should work together. And all of a sudden the ROI on the content is very different because all you need is one person to go, you know what? The way you explained that was really helpful. Let's hop on another call. Maybe let's work something out. So you don't need virality, So that's a cool way of thinking about the content side too.
Yeah, it's different, but I almost feel like it's easy. You know what it is? I was talking to Alex Becker like a couple months ago, and when I was in Dallas. And the game with this is like the first business you start, everyone almost gets stuck in it because it's what you're used to. It's what you've been doing for a while. And so no one ever does the hard choice of either completely stopping or actually pursuing the next vehicle. Everyone just wants it, right? So in info, you can get to multi-seven figures a year, 8 figures a year. But if you want to get to 9 figures and above, you have to do something completely different. Or your opportunity somehow gets you there if you have a game plan. But for the most part, you have to play different games, right?
Yeah.
Like Elon Musk, when he first started his company Zip2, it was like, I think it was like a Yellow Pages equivalent or something. Completely different from his next venture, PayPal. But if he's just stayed in that and tried to grow that and continue, he might not be Elon Musk today. And I think it's the same thing as like when you first start business, you have no context, you have no skills, you don't really know what you're doing. So you pursue whatever vehicle or opportunity is in front of you, or that just first starts to take off. You get to a point in business though where you plateau, or maybe you're not even passionate about that business anymore, but whatever it is. But then where I think 99% of entrepreneurs, if not more than that, fail to do is they can't get to that next, they can't pull the trigger because they know they need to do it. Maybe they need to start SaaS. Maybe they need to start a different business idea that actually has potential and a growing market that can take them to that next level in business they want to get to. But they end up creating all these constraints that don't allow them to get there. So it could be a time constraint where now you're stuck in your business. You're working so much, you don't even have time to start another business even if you wanted to. Maybe you have a lifestyle constraint, right? You started making good money. You have all these expenses now. Now you can't stop running the company because if you do, you give up everything that comes with it. And so it's interesting to see the reinventing that you have to go through, which I feel like I'm going through right now in terms of, hey, I need to do this to get to that next level.
Yeah, we went through that even with moving from Ship30 to PGA. We still run both, but Ship30 is largely automated at this point, and all our focus is essentially on PGA. And they're completely different businesses. That was the whole reason why we pulled the trigger on the mastermind, because it's like, in order for us to advance, we need to adopt a different business model or build something different. And I'm very aware of that. I don't know. Well, I think we're a couple years away and we'll kind of see where we shake out. But I'm very aware that with info products, a lot of times the creator is the bottleneck, you know, and you can get to $1 million a month. You can build, I think, a 10, 20, maybe even $30 million info business, but you're probably not going to get to 100 million, and you're probably not going to get into multiple hundreds of millions. And that's where I think sort of the two models that you have are, you either go the SaaS route or you go the B2B enterprise route. And
Correct.
Those are two very different games and require completely different skill sets. And it ends up being a little bit like a burn the boat situation, you know, because if you're going to make that transition, inherently, you can't really keep doing the thing you're doing and give the next thing your full attention. So it's sort of like, do I burn the boats? Do I shut it down? Do I try and sell it? I'm going to take a hit on my cash flow in the short term. You know, there's a lot of working pieces, and I'm aware that I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm excited to see what that's like. But I think there's a lot of working pieces in order to go from 7 figures in terms of revenue and even net worth into 8, because it inherently requires very different ways of thinking. I'm excited to get there, and we'll see what it's like.
Sounds good, man. Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today and
we covered a lot.
So hopefully this is a lot of value for anyone watching and listening. But thanks for coming on, man. We'll stay in touch. And I think keep me posted on your journey. We're nearby. And likewise on my end.
Yeah, thanks for having me. There's a lot we can jam on too. And like I said, any questions you have, I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll continue to pick your brain a bit as
Yeah.
we continue growing. And once the shipyard's done, I hope you come by.
I hope I come by for an espresso
Yeah.
early in the morning, do some writing. So,
It'd be awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
of course.